tech support to tell us always good. That was good. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the seminar on how to write a scenario in about an hour, probably less, and live with you, maybe a little bit of help from our guests. So to introduce ourselves, I'll stand up to introduce me. I'm Gaz, I'm one of the co-hosts of the What Would the Smart Party Do podcast. Available here, you can pause the video to check that out. And also with my good friend Guy, I do Unconventional Gems, which we've launched live at the cocktail night here at the KRAKEN Summer 2023, which is an actual play podcast, YouTube live series, even not even just podcast, but you can see us in the flesh. So lots of good things, lots of gaming experience, and I'm going to use that with my friends to write a scenario for you people right now, or with you people, I should say. So, Guy, introduce yourself.
Yeah, do I have to stand up?
You have to.
Good, right, I'm Guy. I am also the other half of Unconventional Gems that Gaz has just talked about, so I won't tell you any more about that, but go and watch it, if you haven't already. I also blog about mostly one-shot RPGs at burnafterrunningrpg.com. There's loads of ready-to-play one-shots. There's probably loads of examples of the kind of thing that we're doing. I'm not saying that the scenarios there took me as long as an hour to write sometimes, but there's lots of stuff on there you can go, so go and check it out.
And my name is Ben, and I'm the other co-host of What Would the Smart Party Do, along with Gaz, and friends with these guys for many, many years. Also the author of the King of Dungeons role-playing game, and a convention GM of decades of standing. And let's see how we go, shall we?
Over 100 years of experience sits before you. You can judge for yourselves next round, that's a good thing to remember.
What the distribution is between the three of us.
A century of scenario expertise.
Indeed, yeah. So we've written a lot of convention scenarios, and we're going to try and give you some flavours of different types you could do, how we go about the process, maybe get some ideas from you in the audience as well if you're keen. If you're not, we'll just make our own fun. That's all right. You can watch. So I guess the first thing to do is start talking about some of the possible structures we could have. I think what we'll go for today is a kind of generic fantasy setting. Obviously there's lots of different ways we can do this, but rather than like dive deep into Glorantha lore or a particular D&D thing or something like that, we'll try and keep it fairly general so that it's accessible for everyone and give you some ideas. But the sort of techniques we talk about are applicable broadly. So I try to start listing some of the ways we can do things, and then maybe we can go through some examples we've got as well, that sort of stuff. So, there's many different ways we can such things, but here's 5 basic ones. And we encourage you to look at things like Sly Flourish's site, or Justin Alexander's, or we'll put some links in the video when it comes out. But a classic method is having either an NC, or maybe a villain that you've got in mind, a big bad, or something that's happening, and then kind of work backwards. And you fill in details that way around, so that's how you might start. Another way of doing it is perhaps you've got a bunch of PCs, like you're thinking of the Magnificent Seven or something like that, or a starting idea, and then kind of work forward to sort of where you're going to. Option 3 is kind of do it in a scriptwriter type way, where you've got a 3-scene story or a 3-act story, A, B, and C, so you might have an idea about how it's going to start, how it's going to end, or what you want the big scene to be at the end, and then a filler one and perhaps some connective tissue to take between them. Another way is to kind of expand on that and make it a bit more meaty and give your players a bit more choice, which might be a starting scene, and then there's a couple of different ways they could go with it. And then come back in again together at the end for your big climactic finale that you've thought of. And you can have as many nodes and branches and stuff in there to make it more or less interesting, exciting, long, short as you want to do. And perhaps the last example I'm going to go with is you have a central location, like River Deep or wherever, where something's happening. Perhaps it's more investigative, or there's things you have to collect. And then you have loads of little B1, B2, BN, but loads of things that can happen. And players can kind of go in and out, or like spokes of a wheel between the spokes. And you don't really mind what order they do things in, but you'll have lots of things they can do, and ultimately they'll come back together for a mass battle. So the guys will give you a couple of other examples, but for this one, a mass battle's a thing. So like the Magnificent Seven, you might have a village that is threatened by hill giants or whatever it might be, and then they might have to accumulate other allies or resources or find information about the bad guys that are coming. So it might be recruiting the dwarf miners who have explosives, it might be seeking help from the elves who have archers or things like that, and you can create lots of little scenes with different types of tasks that the players have to accumulate or do, or challenges to make each one slightly different and more interesting. and ultimately come back again to the middle and have a big mass battle scene. And depending on how well they've done it, all the little things will make it easier or harder at the end and more flavourful. So I've done that with Savage Worlds because the mass battle rules are great. So that's one example of that. Have you got an example of perhaps one of the styles you could do?
Yeah, so working. Watch that flip chart.
Health and safety.
So looking at the ones in the middle, it's easy to see this as a sort of really, really simple system where you've just got A, B, C, and actually revealing some sources. I've run a few games of Feng Shui, sort of Hong Kong action cinema game, and the instructions for designing adventures in that are really opposite. It says like 3 fights. It's not just 3 scenes, it's 3 fights. And that can seem really simplistic. The way to make that a little bit more interesting is to have multiple ways to go between them. And then you might even have multiple ways to resolve each fight or each scene within it. So in my 13th Age Glorantha game yesterday, you have a fight scene where you fight some brew in the forest. That's sort of the inciting incident that gets you moving straight away. And then as you go through Snakepipe Hollow, you encounter some lunars that are being besieged by Gorp. And so there's a few different things you can do. You've got a monster, you've got some lunars that you might ally with or you might fight with, and then they lead you through the final confrontation, which is, in that adventure, is like a huge brew tribe of hundreds of brew that you're not going to be able to fight, but there's a giant stumbling around, there's the lunars around. Your final confrontation, depending on how you approach it, might be a scene where you sneak in and get what you're looking for out of it. It might be that you end up fighting the lunars, it might be you end up fighting the giant, it might be that you end up fighting just the leader of the brew, or it might be a scene where you've got to just survive an onslaught with it. So each of these is quite flexible in how they do it. And so don't think when you look at a sequence like this that it's going to be really simplistic and railroady, because the way to guard against that is to make each of these have lots of options in them. And that's fairly easy to do if you just think about different ways you can do it. The other thing is if you just have 2 or more middle bits, and this can be as simple as, do you want to take the safe route up the mountain, up the paths, or do you want to go through the dark wood, which will be quicker but more dangerous? And you have a little bit of player choice there that will all lead through to a sort of final scene with that. Ben, do you want to talk about the top couple with some examples?
Yeah, so the top examples which we talk about picking your end scene or your villain or your big encounter at the end that you predict is going to happen and working backwards from there. It's a bit of a classic for a good reason. It generally seems to work. And I think for convention gaming, it's absolutely ideal. You will usually have your 4-hour slot. So there is a different approach to preparing a convention scenario than there is for one you might be doing in your regular home game, which is kind of being laid down as you go along week by week. And all of that is different to what you would do for a published scenario. Right. So you know your audience, but envisaging how you would like your game to end, not specifically, but just in a general way, which might be a violent showdown in a location, or it might actually be an almost anticlimactic, the prevention of a ritual actually taking place. It might be stopping something. Working backwards from there can be useful, but it's not useful if you don't know your starting point as well. And the starting point should always be the PCs, always. You should know what PCs you've got, because if it's your home game, it should be pretty obvious who your PCs are. It's the other people who show up every Tuesday night and knock on your door. Those guys, look at their bits of paper, that's their characters. And if you're at a convention, you are almost certainly supplying pre-gens, I would imagine. It's rare to not do that. Of course, there are some games that may be slightly non-traditional, where you might generate your characters as part of the activity, but usually you will know your characters. And the technique that I like to use, and I learned this from Neil Gow, who's a good friend of ours who isn't here this year, but Neil Gow is an absolute pro at GMing. And he wrote Duty and Honour, Beat to Quarters, the Empire System. We'll link him up so that you know where to go for that.
Yeah.
One of the great techniques he uses in his games is he goes through a list of scenes you would like to see. And he does that at the table. He goes around the characters, or goes around the players, I should say, goes, what sort of thing would you like to have happen in this game? Which can be, you're a bit on the spot with that. But I use that technique for my lonely fun when I'm sitting there with my Google Doc and it's open, there's a cursor just flashing and I've got nothing to do. I just think of scenes that I would like to see. One of them may be the final scene, but more often than not, I like to home in on the details. So if it's some kind of action adventure, I like to think of a pub exploding and players come over, player characters flying out of the window and rolling along. I like to think of a dragon spitting out a paladin that is swallowed the day before and it rolls along the forest floor. Oh, forest, I'd like there to be a bamboo forest. and there's a hurricane going on as well. And you just start brainstorming scenes you would like to see. They don't have to be connected at all, and largely they won't be connected at this point. And of course, if you look at your player characters, there should be scenes that they want to see, which maybe even subconsciously they've told you about. So if you're playing a Wild West game, or any of those games where you have a disadvantage, which might be, I have an enemy on my trail, you know, I'm being hunted, I'm wanted for something, well then they're going to want to be confronted. So there's a scene that needs to come into a game at some point. Why not now? So you have their arch enemy show up, or they're seeking revenge on some type of clan. Well, then you need to set up a situation where that happen. And then you've got all of your PC stuff, you've got a bunch of scenes that make no sense at all in the middle, and maybe one of them is starting to flash at you as like this could be quite a big end encounter. And then the hard bit is joining it all up. But that structure of starting from the characters and ending somewhere gives you a one shot that's bookended by the right things.
Yeah, and I think it works both ways. So if you have got someone who thinks there is a hunter or something like that, then you can make one of your PCs be wanted or be hunted or whatever, or you know, you start with your PC and they want vengeance. Well, the person on vengeance against better be in the scenario, and you can start precursoring. So we've given you quite a bit of info dump there about certain ways and techniques, so we might try and involve you a little bit. Is there a preferred sort of style anybody wants? I'm going to risk falling over the flip chart again by standing over here, but what are you going to do? Anybody got any preferences? Or shall we go with the kind of middle option? I'm going to go middle option. There's lots of, for people on camera, there's lots of people nodding enthusiastically.
There was at least 50 people were nodding.
At least, there's so many it's hard to count, but yeah, we'll
Which
say
isn't a huge proportion of the audience, but it's a lot of people.
It's enough feedback, right? So I think we're going to have some kind of instigating scene. We're going to have perhaps a big end scene, and then we'll do some connective tissue in the middle to build our scenario up, right? I guess we're thinking sort of fantasy, but it would be easy enough to change this to cowboys or whatever else it is you want to do. Make it sci-fi, you know, if you want to do. So, has anybody got an idea about something cool they want to happen? As Ben was describing there, any kind of scene at all, and we might work out later where we put it. Anything interesting? I'm going to ask Guy if you don't come up with something.
Could also start with just a monster or something you want to have
Or a
in it. Could be
theme, yeah.
just
Flooded sewers.
Sewers?
Yeah, flooded.
Flooded. Of course it's flooded.
Is anyone else thinking Woofra immediately?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Immediate link from sewers is.
Well, it could be flooded with like jam or something. Sweet jam, something that would not be in a sewer.
I'm going to put viscous substance, and we might work out
Breakfast spread. No.
viscous substance. Okay, so to kind of get another element to that, I don't want it to be rats, I don't want it to be Woofra. I know it's not all about me, it's about us. But like to make it more interesting, what else might be down there? Is there something that lives there? Is there something that's...
There's a giant sleeping reptile.
Giant sleeping reptile. So I don't know about you people, but I'm already thinking about other things that might come from this. In terms of, did it get down there when it's small and it was too big to get out? Do you need to get it out? Do you need to go in and get it? What else is it doing? So as part of your scenario building design, when you start adding on, start thinking about, well, what else does that mean? And if the sewers are full of jam, whatever it is, are they not working? So what does that mean for the city above it? And is there something else we can introduce for that kind of thing? And a lot of, I don't know, you guys might have a different view, but a lot of my design process, when I start adding these things in, it's thinking, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for my scenario, my fantasy world, or whatever it is we're doing? Like, there'll be repercussions for some of this. So how am I going to foreshadow that to players as part of the design process?
Yeah, and I think one of the things, some really good advice that I read a while ago was actually about sort of improv and how improv artists do is you most of the time you want to go for the obvious, like the first thing that pops into your head. So if you think giant sleeping reptile, like the first thing that popped into my head was like a cult down there worshipping it. And so, I mean, you don't need to write it down if I'm not in the audience, but that's
Well, we might
that's an
decide
idea.
it, but I'll write it down.
But rather than try and be really original and really think of something really new, start with something and do the links to it. And by the time you've got a few, it will be something original, but it'll also be something consistent that makes sense.
There's a big unknown factor in every scenario, which is the players and the characters and what they do. You can't necessarily predict what is going to happen in your scenario, nor should you if you want to have some fun as a GM. But as a scenario designer, it is much easier to come up with situations than it is to come up with plots. You're not a novel writer. You can be a novel writer if you want, but that's not an RPG session. And it is a different set of skills to not know the answers to everything. You don't have to know the answers to everything at all. So just looking at this stuff, there will be a tendency, and it's happening with me now, to try and join it all up and make it make sense. You don't have to do that. That's the story. The story is yet to happen. That will be what happens when a group of 4, 5 or 6 different individuals come to it and they bring their magic source. And we have to leave gaps for that too. We have to leave unknown things. That adds the element of mystery into your scenario without even trying, because we're not really sure what's happening. And it will start to firm up, but this has happened to me as a younger man. I would often get blocked very, very early on by not being able to come up with a good plot that hadn't happened before. But I'm not Stephen King, none of us are, or Agatha Christie, or any of those mysteries. Or Ben Hannah, of course. But I can come up with individual situations. I can come up with something is on fire is a perfectly valid encounter in a scenario.
Yeah.
Something is on fire. I pretty much have that written in pen at the top of all of my brainstorms.
I'm going to change to red pen and add that
Yes,
in.
please,
Just
yeah. Something is on fire.
Something is on fire. You may have noted I did scribble a little bit as well, because as we mentioned, we need some number of PCs. And I'm thinking about how can I include them in the scenario. It'll make your scenario better if there's stuff on the carriage sheet that directly feeds into what's going on in your scenario, right? So we've said there might be a cult. So I said maybe someone's sibling is a cultist. Maybe they've been captured by the cult, or maybe they've joined, maybe brainwashed. You want to get them back. So that's immediately a hook for one NPC. We've got a giant reptile. Someone's going to be a beastmaster or something. Do they want to get some babies from this thing? Do they want to catch all its eggs? Do they want to rescue it? Do they want to kill it? Do they want to milk it for its whatever thing that you might milk it for? I don't know. That's another big question mark. What can we milk the reptile for? It might be an element.
There's a viscous substance. Let's throw in some bees or wasps, something like that, that's attracted to that, and with that accompany some oral stuff as well, some humming that's just invading the sewers.
So yeah, okay. Is the viscous substance like seeping from our reptile, and then we've got an insect colony that feeds off the jam.
Yeah.
I'm going to put jam in quotes. I don't know whether you want to put it on your bread, but okay. So we've got jam, we've got insect hive, we've got an ominous buzzing. I'm going to add up for a PC, maybe addicted to jam.
Can we say that the reptile normally performs a useful function? So the problem is actually that it's asleep rather than that it's
In an
there.
awkward location. It's in the
Yeah.
sewers, probably be somewhere else.
I almost went business and wrote lack of functionality last night. I don't think it's very exciting. So, normal service to resume. I don't know, how do we phrase this, people? You're here, you're supposed to be helping. Why are you helping me?
So this taps into the myth then, doesn't it? So this is
Yeah.
where we get a bit fantasy. So that could stand in for all kinds of things, other genres. But the idea of some sleeping reptile underneath a city seems to be quite mythological to me, maybe a bit Arthurian even. Or you've got your dragons in Loranth Abbey that form the mountains. So it would seem reasonable to me that you could go back in history to get, and we should be careful when we go to backdrop that it is very, very bite-sized. You don't want to be reading out pages of text. But I can imagine that the city was built on the fallen body of a dragon, a reptile, whatever it is, and it's been built up over the top of it for many years, and maybe the internal organs of the dragon are the sewer. And it's something that is like the patron saint of the city. And there will be festivals for it, sacrifices. As long as they feed the dragon, or whatever it is that's underneath the city, then the crops will bloom that year and there will be success for the city. And that's immediately your hook, isn't it? Like, things have gone wrong, the crops are failing, there's been plagues, the bell tower fell over.
Ominous buzzing everywhere.
That's right. The university grades weren't as good as the previous year. So, so you've been called in as a kind of medieval Ofsted to see what on earth is going on.
And there'll be a scene later on when there's an earthquake in the city's.
Correct. Correct. Because that's where the fire starts.
And that'll wake that reptile up.
But if the sewers are the insides of the dragon and there is a reptile living in the sewers, it might be a parasite inside the dragon.
That's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
I
And the dragon will wake up
Parasite.
because this parasite is somehow poisoning it and
Yes.
destroy the whole city.
Yeah, so we think about what Joe said about bees, and I think of those wasps that lay their eggs inside live creatures, don't they? So this would be like a source of power, both for the city and for something that is maybe a natural phenomenon, but you've essentially got a giant wasp nest under your city,
Yeah,
and it's causing more problems than you thought it would do.
You can have a mountain and it's the dragon that keeps the city warm.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
in the icy, if the dragon stops warming the city, then everyone dies.
I started with a colour-coded system, but I can't.
On those parasites, there are those really scary real-world ones where they hatch inside a caterpillar or something, and then the little thing takes over the caterpillar and wanders it around.
And now you've got things coming out of the manholes into the streets, haven't you, as the thing escalates.
This is my scenario writing process. I start when you remember earlier when I asked you questions and everyone's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But then when you start, also it's like, wait a minute, I know. There's this, and this is what happens. I don't know about you guys, but in my brain, that's what starts happening. You start putting post-it notes down and writing things, and then before you know it, you're going, well, it could be this, it could be that. What about that? What about this thing? And that's all part of it. Like, don't think that writing is necessarily Google Doc heading, go Act 1 to Act 3. A lot of it is just get ideas down and then worry about it later, right? So can I just do a bit of a summary of where we're at? I didn't want to stop the creative flow of jam, but I think so we've got some possible ways in. I think that the jam should be highly addictive. This is how I'm reading it. Tell me if anyone wants to go in a different direction. We've got a hollowed out beast, maybe a dragon, or that's kept asleep by the giant sleeping reptile. Its jam is the thing that keeps a soporific effect on the dragon, which stops it waking up and destroying the city as it gets up and stretches and cracks its back out and stuff like that. It's supposed to be a furnace for the city which keeps the warmth, but because the reptile's also fallen asleep, there's not only a danger that the dragon awakes, but the heating's turned off also. So maybe there's possibly several different ways we can refine that a little bit more. But we're going with creature within a creature, and the jam's important, right?
And I think there's the thing about who we're going to fight in this.
If the cult has brought in the
Forgot about the cult. There's a cult.
yes,
Yeah, that's
if
what
the-
I was thinking.
if the doomsday cult brought in the bugs or the bees from a different biome to the lizard to try to weaken it or wake it up, because as soon as the lizard wakes up and moves, the dragon will move and everything will fall apart.
So we're going to call them the cult of the awakened, and they're hoping to get their high holiday when they awaken the dragon, and then they'll be taken to Nirvana or whatever it is, or eaten first or last, depending on what they want.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but if the heating's going to fail, then we should set it such that either winter is coming or, it's very cold out.
The icy mountains.
So you raise the stakes by saying it's not like it's going to be a bit nippy, put on an extra jumper. It's like we're all going to freeze to death.
I mean, I could go one or two ways. I think that's a perfectly valid way of doing it. The other thing I'm thinking is possibly a sleeping volcano. That if you don't sort it out, the whole thing's going to explode. So either one's good, but I like winter is coming, so we'll randomly write it down here.
But we've got a sense of time now as well, haven't we? So these events or these cool scenes that we would like to see have now got momentum.
Yeah.
So you can start to think about how they happen chronologically, and you can see there's a ticking clock element, and that's what you need a scenario. It needs to have forward motion, and it needs to be ready to go. And then as soon as you get your players at the table and you tell them what's happening, the ball then tips over the edge and starts rolling through all of these things that you expect to see, but we may not see it all.
Yeah.
And I think that too much prep will damage you. We could turn this into a campaign or a sequence of 8 novels fairly readily if we just keep going. At some point you need to know when to stop and then sort of chisel stuff away, and don't be too afraid of crossing stuff out. Don't be too afraid of killing your great first idea which no longer fits. Toss that and use it in the next scenario. There's no such thing as a wasted idea.
Yes. And then you can also finesse things as well. So we had flooded sewers, but they might be, if we went volcano, it might be flooded lava tubes. But you can dress things up in different ways to make them then fit individually. Okay, I think that's probably enough initial idea. Shall we start trying to
move it to structure
back into a shape
and see
Yeah.
what kind of things. What might be worth thinking about what kind of scenes we've got. The sort of situation might be worth thinking about what kind of scenes we might see, and then we can think about what would be a good finale, what would be a good at the end, what might be the inciting incident that the first thing that happens to the players. Because if we're prepping this as a sort of convention one shot, or even for your home group, it's good if that first scene is snappy and actiony and gets going straight away. So it's not as in a meeting with the sort of town council saying, oh, we've got this problem with the fire's gone out. It's not a dull like mission briefing like that. It's the immediate consequences of that are apparent to us. And maybe then we see the town council and they say, oh yeah, we've noticed that too. We've been attacked by giant wasps too. Like, you'll have to deal with it.
Yeah, so something that would spring to me, I'll open it up to you guys to throw other ideas if you want, but due to the fact that we've got all this jam where we're like maybe in the city centre or whatever, the town fountain explodes with jam because there's just too much backed up in one place and it bursts out, and that causes a bunch of giant wasps to come out after it. So you've suddenly got a nice market town that everybody's in, and there's jam everywhere and wasps are attacking and people are around screaming, something's on fire, because that helps. But like, rather than have like, a guy in the pub go, oh, my town's really struggling because the heating's not working, and I pay you 10 gold pieces to maybe take 7 days travelling there. Like, let's start in a marketplace with giant wasps attacking. Would be an example, but I'm open to offers.
And you could do the kind of, it's unusually cold in the marketplace, funnily enough.
Yeah, everybody's roaring. The hat seller's doing roaring trade because he's getting through loads of hats.
Yeah, and so it's covered in jam.
A classic idea you would have seen a million times before is some idea of a festival, which again gives you a bit of world-building opportunity. So it's that festival that you get at the start of winter in your world, which is like, whether it be Christmas or Yuletide or something like that, about like, here's our sacrifice to our gods so that our food stores will last us through the winter, but this is happening unusually in 4 feet of snow this year. So there's an unexpected hazard, but there's a reason for being there and a reason for pulling all of your NPCs into one place at the start, so we can scatter them due to jam-infested wasps, and no doubt put them back together again at the end for a happy celebration where everyone gets medals and cake.
With jam.
Yes, jam tarts.
Jam and skull.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. Alright, so I guess we're going autumn festival, but it's more like winter.
Mm-hmm.
Are we happy with exploding fountain of jam wasp attack, or is there something somebody else would like?
There needs to be a man yelling at the street, winter is coming, and everyone as they walk through.
We're going to come on to the fact about having sort of friendly NPCs.
Yeah.
About having sort of friendly NPCs that can interact with the party and get the player characters to talk to each other. But
how does he know?
Yeah, so it's actually useful. Some like a man in a sandwich board shouting, "Doom, doom, winter's coming, it's all a curse."
Yeah.
The sewers are filled with jam and everyone's going
Just eating all of that again with his
until the jam explodes.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe. But he could be a source of information. He could,
I need more colours.
This very process, it always goes this way. You end up thinking of more things, thinking more questions, following alleys, etc. Don't forget that your players are going to want to do that as well. So if you're presenting it as a player, you're at this festival and this stuff happens, they're immediately going to start asking the questions that we started asking ourselves. You can't plan for everything and shouldn't plan for everything. It's okay to improvise on the day. What you want at this stage is a nice, strong, blocked out structure for yourself, so that if you go off on a tangent, you know where to come back to. That's all it's for. Okay, so we're not just going to write the first scene and let everything else be improvised, but you just have a spine for your adventure, don't you? So you know where to go.
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to suggest we do at this point is block in the end as well. We've got a strong opening scene, and we probably want the culmination of a ritual with cultists and the sewers and the lizard, right? That's probably where our adventure's going to end. Yeah? Everybody happy?
No.
Disinterested?
I've played so many games where you get to the end and there's a bunch of cultists trying to summon a thing.
Oh, they're trying to summon, it's there.
But yeah, it's like...
What's your alternative then?
I don't know, but let's push it.
Well, that's not helpful. I'm going to discount your challenge.
I wonder.
You have 2 challenges remaining.
I wonder if it can be a bit more. We could add a bit of interest to it because
Yeah.
we want this reptile to stay asleep.
Yeah.
So I quite like the idea of a mass fight to stop this ritual. But everyone's got to be really quiet
Yes.
in case the reptile wakes up.
Yes.
And so there's lots of, there's big gongs hung up and things. There's great big trumpets. There's lots of really noisy things around. So maybe that's the twist, that we want to stop awakening. Because I take your point. It is a bit of a classic. I've used it more times than I care to count. But it's popular for a reason.
You can also have the cultists in like beekeeping suits down there, so they're not in the dark robes with the daggers and stuff. They're actually
Yeah. So they can handle the wasps. They've got.
Guys, you said you want more colours, and you said you forgot what your colour scheme is, but you're using 3 different colours. Do they signify different things? And
I'm now trying to re-establish colour discipline,
what is the discipline here?
but I've done it wrong. Much like when you start mapping a dungeon, you draw one line and go, oh no, I've done it wrong. And there's only one line on the map. At the minute, I'm kind of going for like big, bold things. So green at the minute is like point. I'm trying to say like the green's going to be there. So that's a starting scene, that's an ending scene, and I'll try and green line.
On your original diagram, these are the A, B, 1, C, 4.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. And then other colours at random, depending on how I feel about it.
I guess that's A and that's C.
Yeah.
And we're going to do the B's in the middle.
Amazing.
I do use a kind of a system, whether it be colours or fonts or whatever. I'll have people, so they will be in one particular colour. My NPCs or even my PCs, of course, just the persons that are people that are going to be in the adventure. I'll have places, will be another one, and I'll have purpose, 3 Ps. So some clues or some stuff that's going to drive things on, some inciting events. And those ones float for me. So I usually do them in batches of 6. I suppose in my mind I'm thinking if ever I'm stuck I can roll a d6 to see which one on my little list it is. So I have this person, I have this place, I'll have this clue. Those can float around for me. So my middle structure is often quite amorphous, but it has got those things. And the colour scheme helps then, because if I take one from red, one from blue, one from green, I've got a C.
I've just added a library down here at the bottom, because I imagine that this is taking place underneath the library, and that's like generally everybody's quiet. So.
All the librarians, there are exactly 66 of them, and they're all first level AD&D wizards, and they only have the sleep spell. Join all that to do a massive one. And they are the Slumber Academy.
Yeah. If you want to do more foreshadowing, there's 65 and there's a notice up all around the city asking for a librarian. Wanted, urgently.
Yeah. Magic missile need not apply.
Okay, so we've got a strong opening scene with a fight and probably rescuing people who need rescuing and all that kind of stuff, and it'll be cool and interesting, and we've got an idea about what might be going on. We probably know where we want to end up. So what we need is some stuff in this empty space, which might be linear. It might be go to B1, B2 and come back again. It might be Bs 1 to 6 and you can go in any order and you'll get various clues. So we just like brainstorm some things that could happen to get us on the way.
I'd just say in terms of structure, this for me is sort of screaming out that these will be a group of scenes in the middle that could happen in any order, and even like once we're down in the sewers, we could decide what order that happens in, even at the table, depending on the consequence of that. We don't need a really complicated web of what order they go in. We can have. I've blogged about this idea of when you run one-shots in a dungeon, you often need a collapsible dungeon. So that the rooms in the middle, you might not need all of them because you need to get to the end and finish the thing. So a selection of scenes, and we don't need to worry necessarily now about what order they go in. We can sort of finesse that later when we look at how it works. So just cool things that would happen.
Yes. So you have the sibling. You might be the PC. You might have a sibling.
Yeah.
So when you said that, I thought there was this idea. Let's have a dilemma where if you can get something that will help in the final confrontation, but to do that you have to betray your sibling, so exploit them for information or an introduction or something like that, and try and frame that in a scene so there's a real choice for the players. You can mess up your family forever, but you will have a slightly improved chance to save the city, or not.
Yeah. And this is where my technique of people and places comes in really handy. So if I think of a handful of NPCs that you would expect to see in this situation, you would have the town mayor, you would have someone who works in the library, you would have a cultist. Any one of those three, that's the first three off the top of my head, you can then tie that to a PC, one way or another, and they can be in conflict with that PC, want a different agenda, or they can be on the same side. By the time you've done that with 4 PCs or 5 PCs and your 6 NPCs, you've got an almost infinite number of combinations of stuff that can happen, and it's all just waiting for you to set the match to it.
Yeah, I've got the prophet, I've got the start, the mayor, because they'll be saying, we could be like the Jaws style mayor, we're going, everything's fine, we don't need to do anything. There is no jam. It's stood in front of a big fountain of jam.
Mine is toast.
Yeah.
Jam's good.
We've got the cultist who can be related to it, maybe related to one or more. It could be the sibling of one and the wife of another or something like that, whatever that kind of thing. I'm also going to stick in criminals as potential, because wherever there's some kind of exploitable opportunity, there'll be a gang. So maybe the gangs are trying to like corner the market on jam or whatever it might be. But and again, these might get crossed off. But this is now my NPC list, which can expand if we've got interesting people we think we might have to throw in.
The hat makers are suspicious. They knew that they would need to make hats. I mean, it takes a while to make a hat, but they seem to have so many hats. They're clearly behind all of this.
Right. So yeah, there we go.
Milner's Guild.
I'm going to put Guild Master.
Yeah. They can maybe call them somewhere.
So all my deal is we're going to go on several pages, I can tell, but if we have a locations bit as well, we've got the Milner's Guild. They're up to something.
I'm thinking there might be a room. I quite like the idea of being drowned in jam, not personally, but like a room filling with jam.
Because it's thick and viscous really slowly.
Yeah.
But inevitably it's
Yeah, so that, like, just in terms of, at some point we're going to go in the sewer and we do want some cool sort of dungeony action scenes. And
Yeah, so there's a
drowning in jams.
Super junction.
Yeah.
It's a trash compactor. You're a trash compactor, yeah.
Trash compacted jams.
jam strainer with a huge wall of gauze. Okay, any more NPCs or locations people want?
Because I was thinking you might want to smoke out the wasps to reduce to have an impact on the end fight. So you need to get like charcoal or wood, which might mean it could be leaving the city. Might be there's a goblin tribe of charcoal burners being attacked by wolves. So you can't go off piece with the city there, but
That's alright, so we've got definitely charcoal burners.
But if it's really cold, they wouldn't want to give you right now.
Yeah.
So it might be a thing of like.
Winter is coming, why would you
Why would you give us?
so you
Like
need to
to smoke some bars?
you need to do something for them. So
Yeah, we told you to buy more charcoal.
Yeah.
Last month.
Price has
Told you
gone up
winter was
now.
coming. 4 feet of snow, this is premium, yeah.
If we had 66 librarians with magic missile, we could just kill all the
Yeah.
bugs straight away. But everyone was
Yeah.
asleep.
I'll tell you what, burning hands would have been useful.
Yeah.
Burning hands would have been useful.
And the town didn't buy any charcoal because we've got a reptile that just generates heat. Why do we need charcoal? Alright, charcoal forest, Milner's Guild, drowning in jam room.
You've got criminals, which is obviously a nice vague sense of that, but we're going to focusing on that a little bit more. You've almost always got a thieves guild or something which would make its lair in the sewers, and they've had to be displaced, which gives you a sense of momentum as well. So honey-covered thieves are crawling out of like ducts everywhere.
That's a perfect location to fill with jam.
Absolutely.
You have a fight in the underground layer of the criminals, and it's filling up with jam and all sorts of knives and stuff, and getting stuff stuck in it, and coins and playing cards and who knows what.
Criminal
Also, if we had the jam being really addictive, it wouldn't just,
Oh, God, yeah.
the local jam lords be really upset about this whole surplus of jam
Yeah.
driving the price.
It's very Moorish.
Jam riots.
Yeah.
Jam riots.
Just talk about the criminals for a minute. One thing that is really good to have, just generally in your scenarios, is you want some friendly characters. Obviously you want some enemies, which you want, but a good thing to rely is some frenemies. So like the criminals, who are sort of on the same side as you, but also want to stab you in the back and steal your stuff.
Only goblin charcoal burners fall into that category.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yes, it's good to have some, people that could go either way. And so think about a way to resolve it with new friends or enemies. I'm just a bit conscious of time, so we might want to think about pulling this together, get a few more locations. For me, once I've got this is the point where I sort of open the Google Doc when I've got a piece of paper with stuff in different colours scribbled down and start to pull it together and actually, whatever system I'm using, like look up what giant wasps challenge rating is or whatever and think about how many and get some specifics nailed down for the things that I need to prep for that system, which obviously varies. If you're running Dungeon World, it's very little. You don't need an awful lot or some OSR, but if I'm running 13th Age, I'll need to actually have some stuff for those monsters and think about how I'm going to structure escaping a jam room in that quite crunchy system.
Yeah, and there's always element investigation games and stuff like that, so it's worth thinking about having floating clues. So we've got 4 locations here, but if you think about clues that you might want to give to your player to get them in the right direction, so we end up at the cool so you want at the end, is you can just have them as a little list, and they could be in any of these places, or each of the different locations, or people have got a different way of saying it, or a slightly different flavour, but they're all ultimately going to point to the same place. It's worth having them in different styles or different ways of getting them, because then it feels like you're not getting the same clue all the time. But you don't have to say, unless you go to the charcoal forest, you won't find out about how flammable the jam is, because players might not got there. And certainly for conventions, you want to make sure they know this information, like give them the tools they're going to need later. So probably all of them know that stuff, and we'll say it in a different way. You know, put that match out. We've got so much yarn in our Millionaires Guild. You can't have open flames here. You're mad. That kind of stuff. All right, we've got 4 locations as well as the start and end, so that's plenty, I think. Got half a dozen different characters that may or may not come in. Shall we flesh out some of those a little bit? Perhaps just to get a couple of details around. Where do you want to start? Drowning in jam room sounded quite good, or quite popular with the masses with that.
Tracking jam.
You can lean into the tropes of various fantasy games and take whatever their version of a gelatinous cube is and tip in a bunch of sugar on the top of that. And you've got a gelatinous cube of jam, or honey, or Marmite. I like the idea of plenty of condiments in this. I think we could have ketchup, mayonnaise. But turn the jam itself into a monster in whatever your game is, whatever it be 13th Age.
In a town run by jam, where jam is everything, all other condiments must be illegal, right?
You would think
Because
so,
you have
yeah.
to put jam on everything. So
Yeah.
the criminal organization, of course, would corner the market on other mustards and
Yeah.
condiments, right?
I'll put cornucopia of condiments to kind of cover that.
That's a nice sandwich. It would be great with some mustard, right?
Yeah, we've got Jam Monster was the thing.
Right, basically a jam monster. Yeah, there's something gelatinous in every game, isn't there? Jam monster fight. And put some flesh on the bones, like you said, Guy, of a giant wasp is good. A giant wasp on fire is better. A giant wasp being flown, carrying some kind of minor cultists around with their little robes is even better than that. So it's all about turning up the volume on your ideas now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So take the basic building block, give it a twist, punch it up a little bit, and just take it to a level where it doesn't quite go gonzo, because the players will always bring more gonzo. Yeah. And it is important to keep it fairly low key here, because they will always add on another layer of humour. Don't try and force that at all. The idea of a monster made out of a chocolate biscuit, hilarious. That will fall flat. But if you have some encounters in a biscuit factory, that stuff will come out of play, and that will be fine.
Yeah. So what do I want to add to this? So what could possibly happen is this is like the thieves' last stand, I guess.
Yep.
One of them set a wasp on fire.
Yep.
The door slams behind the players. The room's filling with jam and also possibly on fire. And that's it. So that's kind of. Do you want to write more? We're all kind of keen on that. So I'll just put in situ fight.
Maybe they have, instead of barrels of meat and stuff, they have barrels of mustard and ketchup.
Yeah.
That they can break open, the players break open, and then the jam and the mustard come together and something weird happens.
Yeah. Throw mustard at people's eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, burns.
Unexpected combination.
Yeah.
Like wasps might not like mustard or something. There might be some kind of no mustard for these guys. They want something sweet and not sour.
And what I would do if I was writing this probably here is have a little random table.
Yeah.
So rather than thinking wasps don't like mustard, I would say wasps don't, and then 6 keywords, like, get angry by, whatever it might be, condiment. And then when the players do something, you go, okay, oh, let's roll 2 dice and find out what happens. Oh, they're very angry or amorous when they get mustard in the face. You're like,
When I played a lot of games, the thing that changes often is the environment, and the environmental factors have a big impact on
Yeah.
playstyle. So you make all the floor difficult terrain.
yeah, well, it's covered in
Literally
jam.
run through jam. And that can really change the way things work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think you
You've
want
got
to.
to play a character to be a pastry chef. I think they would be really,
Well, halfling.
and suddenly your wizard is in fact really someone who's very good with combat.
The wizard should be a wizard that only knows like magic missile. Like he is the 66th wizard that fed up with it and wanted to go adventuring and not be one
So
of
he's
the
an ex-librarian.
Yeah, the ex-librarian. Then we have a connection to them and he can fill us in.
Yeah, and at some point in this construction of the scenario, this happens, you keep flicking backwards and forwards to your players, your PCs, sorry, and your adventure PCs, and they will start to mesh together. They should do anyway, whether you're picking up adventure from previous week or you're designing for a con. A lot of scenario prep goes into your pre-gen prep, because that's where you seed those things. You start putting secrets and clues into the character sheets.
And you kind of get little things jump out as well, like I'm just thinking then while you were speaking, like there's just a buzzing all the time, there's an ominous noise, but we've got our end sequence that says it's silent, so that'll be a really cool moment, I think, that like you're constantly banging onto the players all the time at what they can hear as you walk into the chamber. It's definitely quiet.
Yeah, it could
Too
change
quiet.
that experience.
And the ex-librarian, oh no.
So these are all things you can think about when you write about what I do when I run it. You can just make little notes for yourself, and that'll be cool. Excellent. Right, so we've got 1 seed. We probably need 3 more. I'm conscious of time.
4 minutes.
Well, we've got a little more. We didn't start till late, did we? We've been over. Okay, so we've got that. Okay, charcoal forest sounds cool. What's good about charcoal forest?
So the fact that it's a kind of goblinoid encampment or settlement that isn't in constant conflict with the city, I think is quite nice for a start. So that will up to expectations if you're new to the city or whatever, that you can have, you know, a small green-skinned but civilised race that just, you know, they like to live their lifestyle. So it's going to be a negotiation. I would think we would be bringing something from the city that the goblins want in order to bring back cartloads of fiery alchemical stuff that they can use.
Can we make the charcoal?
Covered in charcoal if they live in, so they wouldn't be green goblins, they would be
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Charcoal grey goblins.
like soot goblin.
Yeah, the tribe of ash.
Sort of,
Yeah, we want to dress that up. Yeah, absolutely.
Can we make the charcoal forest the obvious thing? So these are weird fantasy trees that grow pre-burned.
Yeah, absolutely.
And due to the nature of this vegetation, you can't grow anything to have yarn like this. They probably don't have any hats. Winter is coming. Like, really, there's a potential, but maybe do a question mark of tying in the milliners somehow if you can get a supply of hats and get to the goblins. Fireproof hats though. Normal hats won't be any good in the charcoal forest, but some kind of fire retardant hat. I don't know. I'm going off in a weird direction now. This might be one of those places where you go. The next day you look back and you go, okay, that's what were you thinking?
But thankfully in fantasy there's always magic is the solution to everything. So a chest full of scrolls that have magic spells on there that will aid the goblins, and you don't need to get any more detailed than that. You've got something that they want which has been organised, but it needs transporting, you need to get a good deal. So it's not just a stand-up fight, essentially, because you know, a string of fights is fine, but a little bit of light and shade in your scenario, because we know we're starting and ending with a combat. Let's have something in the middle that is a bit more talky.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got the pre-agreed payment for a pre-agreed amount. Now we've got this problem. You need to convince them to give you like 2 or 3 times as much
That's right.
on credit.
I mean, you could introduce, so you could introduce paper so they become charcoal artists and things throughout the band. I mean, it's a different.
I'm just going to say culture. Yeah, exactly. It's that classic. If you turn it with a green mount and they go, well, the price has gone up now, because you're in desperate need of it. And then what do you do about that? Okay, I think given time to sit up on that seat, I'm going to start kicking this thing one day. Right, we've got the Milliners Guild. Mr. Guy Milner might be able to cover on this one.
Yeah, and I think this is in the city, isn't it? This is going to be quite civilised. I think you want, for this, one of the things that I would have is a list of like 10 kinds of hat to roll on every time you meet one of them. We need some sort of conflict in this, don't we?
I think they should like be deeply connected to the cult or something, or someone tipped them off or something, so they knew this was coming, right? I mean, they don't have a seer or something. Right?
Yeah, I think the guild master has got his cult hat underneath his milliner's hat.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they probably provided the bee suits.
Yeah.
For the classes.
Yeah, they made the bases. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you see the bee suits, they have like embroidered trademark on them. It's like,
So yeah, maybe you're investigating the guild house, and the things to be found here are, you know, the supplies for making the beekeeping suits.
Yeah, and this is a scene where you can immediately see different ways of doing it. So you might be trying to talk your way in and get information, you might sneak in at night to see what you can find out. So it'd be worth listing a couple of different options for the players, like what would you do at this point? So let's go blue.
So a nice scene that always pops into my head is like that scene where it can happen in modern movies where you burst through a door and there's a bunch of people chopping out piles of drugs for a drug lord, like a little sweatshop essentially. So they're going to be having to up the manufacture of their hats because they know that the opportunity is coming, that everyone's going to be colder. So they're ramping that up. So you could have people who've been, contacts in the town have been called in to do overtime. They need more fuel. Whatever brings you to this place, day or night, this is going to be a source of secrets and clues. So you've got your floating secrets and clues, and I think most of them will probably come from it. This is the aha, now we know who the baddies are moment, whereas before it was quite confusing. You were fighting off wasps and trying to find charcoal, and you can't buy a hat for love nor money in this city, and there's snow everywhere. But this is where the answers come from, and then when you know what you've got to do, the second scenario is solving that.
They could be kidnapping goblins to work in the factory.
Exactly.
I think as well, just to give it a bit of danger, that scene. So talking, sneaking, what happens if it goes wrong?
Yeah.
I think the Milliners Guild obviously have lots of animated fabric guardians that they have. I'm thinking of like Doctor Strange's cloak of levitation type thing. So maybe that's what triggers. Or if it goes south,
Pin-filled mannequins or something with the pins pop inside.
and like odd jobs like bowler hat and stuff. There's loads of
like a floating desk or whatever.
Yeah.
animated loom, like the big loom that's
the hat loom.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that there's lots of they can model the hats on like a golem or something, can't they? There's lots of ways you can do it. Yeah, some sort of imminent danger there that's not just hat makers.
Yeah. And you can set all of the stuff on fire.
Absolutely.
It's all very flammable, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bonus.
They're like stickers all over the place, super flammable.
So it looks like we're heading towards our final encounter now in interstitial scenes.
I was thinking about the flammable signs there, there's got to be a charcoal goblin outside smoking a fag. A sign above him saying, what
It's not really a goblin though, is it?
It's like Larry, he's weird.
Can't say it's a goblin, he's got
One goblin with a hat on, that's suspicious.
Number of days lost work since.
You can also kind of see the criminal layers that drown in jam section as well. I wonder whether I can sneak another one. Is there anything burning in one's got for a fourth place? Or are we happy?
literally or figuratively.
Yeah, both either.
The mayor's house. When you see, like, go into the mayor's house, you see all the kind of insanity of the thing. I mean, the mayor is completely consumed by jam. Maybe he's like can't even move. He's so large. It's jam. And everyone's giving him jam everywhere on everything. It's just like this surreal thing.
So one of them, like the mayor's house is now a junkie's house.
Yeah.
It's where all the jam fiends go.
There are no valuables at all in the house. It's just there's like empty like outlines on the wall where the paintings used to be and stuff. And you have a butler that's really frantic because he's out selling all the stuff and all the beautiful things, and he's like, you have to do something about this.
Yeah, like for an initial scene, you might see someone walking around with a mare's chain on, thinking he's not the mayor. That's right. That's right.
Jam all down his front.
Two guys with a massive portrait and walking on.
And you have the head butler like giving the clues while the mayor doesn't give the menu information and stuff. So it's kind of the flip of the mayor's not giving them the quest. It's the servants.
The mayor has become completely useless, which is a really, really useful thing to have happen in a scenario because it avoids the whole, well, why don't we just go to the authorities?
Yeah.
Well, because the authorities haven't been paid for 2 months because the mayor's been licking it off of his mistress. So you are the authority. It's toast.
And to reinforce what we were saying before is like, we've got a butler who's selling stuff, so straight away he's like, is he a cultist? Is he part of the criminal gang? Like, you can just join back to anything else you've got, like, straight away.
He's quite likely in some ways to be the patron that gets you hooked into the scenario at all. Like, you get a message from someone you used to adventure with, he's now working for a mayor, things have gone wrong.
He can tell you where all the locations are. Like there's something strange happening at the Miller's Guild. Here's the location of the Thieves Guild. Out in the forest you can get some charcoal if you find it in the parks and stuff. He can set up all sorts of
Yeah, and he can present them as problems, can't he? Well, it's not like, oh, I can't get any charcoal from the goblins. And
yeah, I give you like magical items or potions, but I've sold them all. All I have is
I've sold them, yeah. Well, here's the key to my armoury, it's just an empty ring with jam smears down the wall. Ace?
It feels a bit like a countdown as well. When you get some pressure time, and you've got like a clock, like a clock of jam tarts or something as part of your play. Like every time it comes down, you pass out the jam tart. You the clock going down.
You can have buildings getting filled with jam every now and again, and it's like one more building filled with jam, and the jam coming first from the fountain and then from the buildings, people in the street not knowing what's happening, what we're doing.
I'm going to cover all that with jam on later. And you can do it whatever way you think's. Okay. Any more tidying up we need to do? Or shall I just whip through what we've got quickly just to...
Go for it.
Let's get ice.
I was hoping to say no, it's not going to work out. Alright, so...
You're running this at 1 o'clock, Gaz, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I'm not going to eat, I'm just going to do
It's 4th edition D&D, I believe.
I'll find it to yours.
Yeah.
I thought it was really quest.
Okay, so we're going to start, we're going to build some PCs for our venture. One's going to have a symbolic that's a cultist, so that's a possible someone they can get information of, they're inside a man or whatever. Another character we're going to make a lover, perhaps, of that same sibling, just add a bit of stuff. We've got a Beastmaster, we can work out in what way they're involved somehow, but super keen on wasps, or wants to protect the lizard, or whatever it is. We've got someone who's addicted to jam, but we'll like whatever else like might be, possibly I'd say that's probably the big hard character who's really powerful and strong, but he gets his power off the jam, so you can see him sneaking off and he's spinning. We've got a pastry chef. I don't know, maybe for Pathfinder 2 we'll have to think of a better title than that.
It's probably a halfling, isn't it? It's probably a halfling.
And our magician is an ex-librarian, so we've already got ins for everything. The adventure is going to start at an autumn festival, but it's suspiciously wintry. There's a market going on, hats are selling like wild cakes? Hotcakes. And there's an exploding jam fountain. The beautiful thing with probably the city's god spewing water out of his mouth with good jam everywhere, which causes a ton of wasps to fly around. One hits a brazier on the way out and sets on fire. People are screaming. You have to act immediately and sort that out. But what on earth is going on? Orlando 28,
So you probably go to the mayor's house. It's probably the next scene, isn't it, that you go to see what's going on?
Or speak to the doomsday person, that first person.
Yeah, so you've got the doomsday person, and he'll do it. Eventually, you go to the mayor's house. You meet the
foreshadowing.
you see the mayor's house in all. We just talked about it about 3 minutes ago. So we see the jam smeared thing and decide you've got to do something about it. You've then got a few things to get. You've got the Milner's Guild and the Charcoal Forest, and you probably got your two options there to explore to try and do it. But at some point, we're going to have to go underground into the sewers to.
Every time you leave a location, more jam has
Yeah,
come up.
we've got a jammer meter set up, so we can do that. And you might not go to both of those. You might only go to one and skip the first, and that might also be determined by the actual time left of the session that you've got if you're running at a convention.
And if you're running out of time, the clock tower itself explodes in jam, and you're like, okay, time to go.
Yeah, yeah. And then eventually you go down into the sewers.
Where the cultists that you found various clues to along the way are going to try and awaken the mythological dragon that sleeps underneath the city, of which we go back to the statue at the fountain was the dragon, and then the real thing is underground. They're trying to wake it up with their big noise, set off all of the bells in the city at the same time in the church, just a huge amount of noise, and only some desperate special forces of librarians with their shush power can bring everything back down to a quiet conclusion.
Lovely. Beautiful. I think we've got an adventure. Thanks, everybody. Hey, so I guess we might try and write this up. What would be really cool if any of you fancy doing it as well, we'd love to hear from you, right?
Yeah.
And contact us in other ways. We'll put some links in the video. But like, if you put more meat on the bone, more jam on the bread, however you want to call it, like, it'd be great to see some samples of
the next KRAKEN chatbook could be like just 8 scenarios about jam. They're all slightly different depending on our interpretation of it.
I think we should definitely put some jam in the pages and stick them together.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think with time on, we've no time for a Q&A really, but obviously we're around for the rest of the convention, so if you want to come and chat or get other details about how we write our scenarios and things, come and find us. Otherwise, thanks very much for attending.
Yeah.